A common refrain in politics is that people typically vote against their own self-interests. Now, this is really an impossible thing to prove because there is no one uniform reason people vote the way they do. However, what we can show is that people typically vote against their economic interests. So, what do we mean when we talk about voting in economic interests? What we mean is voting for policies that increase your earnings or earning potential and voting against those policies and programs that harm your ability to earn. Since it's economics, we're essentially looking at how much money you save or lose based on how you vote. For our first case study, we're going to be looking at the 1980 election in Ronald Reagan. We're going to be taking a look at what groups voted for him, what Reagan's economic policies were, and how these economic policies affected the majority of his voters, really in the short run, but more specifically in the long run when it comes to inequality. In this graphic from the Roper Center, we can see that the two largest groups that voted for Reagan are people making between $15,000 and $25,000 a year and $25,000 and $50,000 a year. Overwhelmingly, these two groups went for Reagan at 54 and 59% respectively, so the majority of his support came from the working class. Reagan's major economic idea was supply-side economics, better known as trickle-down economics. Essentially, the idea was if the people at the top gained more money, this would then trickle down to the lower classes and the economy as a whole would improve. However, we'll take a look at what actually happened after this passed. Early on in this graphic, we can see that worker productivity and hourly compensation are pretty evenly matched and rise together. Now, they do start to separate in 1973 before Reagan. However, when we look at 1980, we can see that worker productivity starts to really spike, while hourly compensation pretty much stagnates. In 1980, the distribution of income started to become a lot less equal. What happened was worker wage stagnated, as in the previous graph, but business owner wages didn't, which essentially resulted in people at the top earning a whole lot more, while people at the bottom earned about the same as they had been. So how did voting for Reagan hurt his voters? Well, they're making about the same amount as they were before in an economy that costs a lot more to participate in, and if they or their children want to move up the social ladder, they have to go a lot farther, but at the same time, they are making a whole lot less. Next up, we're going to take some time to look at farmers, President Donald Trump, and international trade. And we're really going to see how voting for an elected official can disrupt your entire industry and hurt your ability to make money at your job, as recently happened with the trade war. Early in the decade, farm profits were actually doing pretty well. However, as time went on, they began to fall, and by the time of the election in 2016, they were at one of their lowest points of the decade. So farmers, being fairly reliable Republican voters, showed up for Donald Trump in the election. And farmers did show up very convincingly for Trump. We can see in places where Trump won a lot of the vote share, there is a pretty decent size of the voting age population that are farmers. If we expand this to anybody who makes money related to a farming community, some places went for Trump as much as 5-1. Now let's look at how this vote goes against farmers' economic interests. Soybeans, distillers' grains, and cotton are worth billions of dollars in exports to China alone, meaning farmers make a lot of money off of sending goods to China. And now let's take a look at what the president's comments have been on trade. This is the now infamous tweet in which Trump calls trade wars good and easy to win. While it is from this March, it isn't radically different from his message on the campaign trail. And since entering the Oval Office, he has kicked off a series of trade wars, primarily with China, in an attempt to improve U.S. trade. As we can see using the soybean graph as a microcosm, the price of goods produced by U.S. farmers has fallen. It's impossible to say exactly how much the trade war has currently hurt farmers or how much it will hurt farmers. However, the prices are definitely trending down, resulting in lower wages and incomes. For our final case study, we're going to be looking at a program that protects U.S. residents, specifically the Affordable Care Act. Now, the Affordable Care Act doesn't actually affect how much you earn at your job, but it does prevent you from having to spend more money So really, a penny saved is a penny earned here. A lot of people don't like the ACA simply because they do not like government. However, it is important to note that government has been very successful at keeping people out of poverty. According to the graph above, with no government assistance, about a quarter to a third of the population in the US would be living in poverty. While government has seen some pretty solid success in fighting poverty, people's fears still tend to dominate against the numbers. As we can see in this graph, for most of the existence of the ACA, people have opposed it. Now, while that is changing, looking at the graph, about 40% of the population is still against the law. This hurts people's economic interests because if you don't have health insurance, well, hospital bills are really expensive. Any procedure on this list costs tens of thousands of dollars. So if you have any of these conditions and you don't have health insurance, you really could be stuck paying for the whole operation yourself. Unless you are independently wealthy, it is difficult to get out from under that much debt, especially with a serious health condition. So really the options are be in debt for a long time or its next step, bankruptcy. Now, health insurance would help with this, so voting against health insurance and then having a serious accident is costing you money. In short, voting can affect everything from how stagnant your wage is, to how much your exports are worth in your field, and to how much protection you have from large unforeseen expenses. This isn't to say that everybody needs to put economics first when they vote, but what you do at the ballot box does have a direct impact on your pocketbook.